Thank you, Philip. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As we know, Australia is a net exporter of agricultural products and exports more than half of its agricultural production. Therefore, developments on global markets are very important for the development of the Australian agricultural sector. In recent years, there has been an increasing focus on the impacts of long-term growth in global food demand for world food security, and Mark this afternoon has run through some of those issues. Given the importance of exports to the Australian agricultural sector, it is useful to take a look at the opportunities that growth in global food demand offers for Australia. To do this, ABARES has developed projections of global agri-food markets from 2007 out to 2050. The projections provide an assessment of a plausible scenario for growth in global food demand. As with all of these projections exercises, they are conditional on assumptions regarding likely trends in income growth, such as income growth rates, as well as assumptions on parameter values, such as the responsiveness of demand to changes in incomes. This baseline may serve as a starting point for considering the implications for Australia of global food demand growth over the longer term. Now, note we have used 2007 as a starting point for our projections, as this is the most recent year that relevant data is available for all countries on a consistent basis. Today I will focus on three main areas in my presentation: the key drivers of global food demand growth, the size and composition of growth in global food demand, and how this growth in global food demand might translate into opportunities for Australia. As Mark and Joe have mentioned, key drivers of the growth in food demand will be population growth, income growth per person, particularly in those middle-income developing countries, particularly in China, and increasing urbanisation in developing countries. Taking population first, the UN projects world population to increase by about 40% between 2007 and 2050. Over the same time, total world real income is projected to increase by over 200%. In the ABARES analysis, the real value of world agri-food demand in 2050 is projected to be about 77% higher than in 2007. The higher growth in global agri-food demand compared to population reflects the impact of higher real incomes per person, leading to higher levels of food consumption per person. As we see here, growth in food demand is projected to be lower than growth in incomes. As a result, real food expenditure as a share of world income falls over the projection period. This reflects the point that as incomes rise, consumers spend an increasing share of their income on non-food items, such as housing, consumer durables, and services. Where is this growth in food demand coming from? As we see here, the bulk of the projected increase in global food demand is expected to come from Asia. More specifically, China accounts for over 40% of the increase in global food demand in 2050 compared to 2007. So global growth is growing, but the composition of demand is also expected to change, and we've heard Mark and Joe refer to that already. Increasing incomes are expected to result in a move away from staple foods to higher value foods. As we see here, the bulk of the increase in global agri-food demand is projected to be for fruit and vegetables category and meats. There are also significant increases in dairy products, cereals and fish. With the value of demand for meat and dairy products projected to more than double, the shares of these groups in global demand increases, while the shares of other product groups, such as cereals, decline slightly. This change in composition of global food demand reflects shifts in diets to higher value products as incomes rise. This leads us to the opportunities for Australia. The projected increase in global agri-food demand is expected to lead to increased production and exports of key Australian agricultural commodities. Turning first to production, we see here that the largest increases in agricultural production for Australia are for beef, wheat and dairy products. With Australia's position as an important exporter of a number of agricultural commodities, the increase in global agri-food demand has the potential to lead to higher Australian agricultural exports. Given that much of the growth in demand is likely to occur in Asia, and given Australia's relatively close proximity to Asia, Australia has a comparative transport cost advantage in exporting to Asia. The largest increases in the real value of Australian exports are projected to occur for beef, wheat, dairy products, sheep meat and sugar. I'll touch briefly on beef. Consistent with the global demand story, the bulk of the increase in demand for beef is expected to occur in Asia, particularly in China. And this is as Joe was talking, those incomes in rural areas sort of catch up with incomes in urban areas, and as the lower income groups in both areas sort of increase. In practice, it is likely that much of the increase in demand and imports will be for lower value cuts rather than the higher value beef that Australia has traditionally exported to Japan and Korea. Over the longer term, this might prove to be a good fit for Australia's northern beef industry. The longer term prospects for this segment of the industry will be discussed in detail at the Northern Beef session in the Bradman Theatre tomorrow morning for those who are interested. While Australia is projected to meet some of the increased global imports for key commodities, this will occur in the context of a competitive global market. Competition through increased exports is likely to come from other key exporting nations. Again, using beef as an example, Brazil is likely to increase its exports significantly, while from a proximity point of view, Brazil might be expected to focus on growing markets in the Atlantic region. The strong growth in Asian demand may well see Brazilian presence in Asia, something that we are already seeing. Despite the substantial rise in total value of Australian agricultural exports, Australia is a relatively small player in the global agri-food trade, accounting for only 3% of the projected growth in global exports between 2007 and 2050. As we see here, the growth in the Australian exports is likely to come from a growth in the global pie, so the size of the total export market, rather than an increase in the share rather than an increase in Australia's share of the pie. To sum up, increased global production and incomes out to 2050 are expected to lead to increased global food demand. With income growth, particularly in middle-income developing countries, the composition of demand is likely to change. There are likely to be opportunities for Australia to increase production and exports, particularly in products where we have a comparative advantage, such as beef, wheat and dairy products. Any export opportunities will arise in the context of a competitive global market. While Australia is projected to increase its agri-food production and exports, these increases will not happen automatically. Australia will need to remain competitive in order to meet the opportunities that may arise from the higher global agri-food demand. This means it will be increasingly important for Australia to maintain growth in productivity through ongoing investment in research and development. Thank you.